church that's very much filled with this language of a rock or a stone or a cornerstone, language from the life of Jesus, where Jesus not only spoke of himself as being a stone, but also talked about Peter being the rock upon which he would build his church. And so now 1 Peter, a letter written by the disciples of the great apostle Peter, the next generation of Christians, those who come to know Christ because of Peter and his preaching, they continue this rich vocabulary of stability, foundation, and cornerstone, this idea that our faith, if it's going to be successful at all, has to be rooted and grounded in something stable and concrete and consistent so that we don't waver from the truth of who Jesus is. A teaching that makes a lot of sense. A teaching that balances itself with evangelism and outreach and personal testimony against the reality of this one central truth. So this letter was written in a time in history when persecution of Christians was beginning in Rome and in the suburbs of that great city. But the people who received this letter outside of Rome, probably in what is modern-day Turkey, were not really being persecuted. They weren't being chased out and arrested for their faith, but more than likely they were being mocked and probably socially had become outcasts for their faith. So they were living more in a world probably like that you and I live in today. Not under threat of persecution or arrest or execution for our faith, but probably they had some friends and neighbors who thought they were odd for their faith. They maybe weren't included in every social engagement because we don't want to invite our neighbors who might talk about Jesus to make that dinner party awkward. And so the disciples of Peter are writing to these churches, these early churches, figuring out what it is to be faithful Christians and reminding them that, yeah, it's going to be awkward. That when you live in a culture that is predominantly pagan and you're proclaiming the good news of Christ, you're going to have some social encounters that are strange, that are awkward, that are uncomfortable. You may lose some friends. You may no longer be invited to all the local dinner parties and events. And yet, you still need to proclaim that good news. You still need to live in that place as a tension between being true and authentic to your faith and still trying to be a normal, everyday person. And if the society around you is predominantly pagan, that's a really hard thing to do. So in the first century, the people receiving this letter, they had to deal with pagan festivals and rituals, people eating in certain ways and behaving in certain ways because of their worship of false gods. Well, flash forward to our life. We live in a society and a culture that celebrates lots of holidays that aren't religious. It goes into a culture that eats and drinks and does things for wellness of the self, irregardless of spirituality. And we live in a culture that usually thinks it's taboo that when you're invited over to a dinner party on a non-religious holiday, to start talking about religion. It's one of those topics we're usually told to avoid on a first date. One of these things that are socially awkward. And so for the disciples of Peter, and for us today, we still have this awkwardness. We're not being persecuted, we're not running for our lives, we're not hiding in our basements because of our faith. But in a lot of situations, especially encounters in the workplace or with new friends, we may hold very close to our chest the cards about our faith and not openly share. And this letter warns us that that leads you down a slippery slope to being too much like the pagan culture around you and a lot less like the Christian that you are. And he mentions the fact that our faith is built on this cornerstone so that when we're together, it feels like we're in a holy place. When you're in this sanctuary or other places of worship with like-minded Christians of all different denominational backgrounds, you feel comfortable. The hymns are familiar, the liturgy is familiar, you kind of know when to sing and sit down, the routine is what you know. It's really easy to be Christian in church because it's a really welcoming atmosphere. But when you're not in the church, when you're at home, in your workplace, on the street, in the grocery checkout line, wherever you may be, it can be a bit more awkward to bring up faith or even act in a Christian way without invoking Christ's name because it doesn't seem to fit the social situation. It doesn't fit the culture that you're in. It's hard. When you're driving, you want to be the first one there and not necessarily wave other drivers in. There's times when those Christian actions don't come right to the forefront because people around us are not acting in Christian ways. And we tend to assimilate to the people we're around, the culture we're around, and be culturally appropriate for the setting. Well, the disciples of Peter are warning in this letter that if you do that, it's going to result in you watering down your faith to a point that maybe even you yourself are going to forget that you're Christian. And you're going to put on your Christian behavior and personality when you're in church and in worship. But the rest of the day, people will basically be completely unaware of your faith. You'll put on a different persona, a different way of behavior, a different vocabulary, based on the other settings you're in, as to not to offend or come across as that awkward, strange Christian in the room. And unfortunately, that creates within you two identities. And even in the first generation of the church, those first disciples of the original apostles who are planting churches are realizing that in places where there isn't persecution and fear of death and arrest, there's a very real fear of losing your social status, of becoming an oddity, of becoming someone that people gossip about behind your back because you follow Jesus. And that makes you strange and peculiar. Because maybe you refrain or abstain from certain pagan cultural practices. Maybe you choose to use your money and time in ways that serve others rather than serving yourself. You set aside time to worship and to gather and study with people, set apart from society. In the first century church, that was odd. And in 2017, many people find that to be odd. Not much, unfortunately, has changed. So as we attempt to live this life, avoid the sins of envy of pagan life, avoid the friction and the malice that can be created within our culture, and we try to have these two identities, as we try to be good and do good works as Christ instructed us to, it's sometimes hard to balance that with being our authentic self. Being a real Christian, but also being approachable and being normal. Being a friend and a colleague, being someone other people feel they can invite to dinner parties, and they can take out to lunch, and they can have play dates with, without feeling like if they show up at your house, you're going to thrust a Bible in their face. How do you find that balance? And for the early disciples, that balance was found in this foundation, reminding themselves over and over again that their faith is built on Jesus Christ. And the example of Jesus Christ is not that he, in every single situation he was in, stood in a pulpit, opened scripture, and preached. But sometimes he just sat down and played with kids. And other times he asked people for a drink. And other times he broke bread with people. Other times he came into a situation where it was crowded and everyone wanted his attention. And he kind of found the one person that seemed left out and talked with that person. And spent time making eye contact and listening and responding appropriately. Doing things that were culturally odd, but not necessarily religious, but things that we've come to know to be Christian behavior. But Jesus, as a foundation, set the tone as to what Christ-like behavior is. So in his time and culture, to speak with children and honor that they had a place in society was peculiar and awkward. We think of it as Christ-like. To have dinner with a tax collector was a socially awkward thing to do. We celebrate that and sing a song about little Zacchaeus in the tree. What a wonderful thing. Jesus wants to do that. To have a Seder meal with a bunch of men who are not your biological family is a socially awkward thing to do. And yet we count it as one of our sacraments in the church. So when Jesus began to do these things, they were awkward. They caught people's attention and made people uncomfortable. And religion aside, Jesus was doing weird things. He was a bachelor in his 30s who wandered around talking to people about Scripture. That was the weirdest thing anyone could choose to do. And yet people flocked to him because they wanted to hear what he had to say and witness what he was doing and tangibly be in his presence. So the early church wanted to mimic that behavior. They were struggling with it in the absence of the physical Christ. Sure, when Jesus is standing next to you, it's easy to do those things. He's right here to lean on, to point to. He did it first. I'm acting like him. It's a little bit of a buffer. But when you're in the early church, or on the fringes of evangelism and mission, when you're maybe in your workplace or your school setting or your home life, you can't kind of blame Jesus on your odd behavior. When you have to own it and authentically be a Christian, that can be difficult. And sometimes we can feel that if we open our mouths, we might say the wrong thing and misrepresent Christ. But the early churches that were receiving this letter, they were told to open their mouth anyway. It's better to open your mouth and slightly misrepresent or slightly sound like a fool than to keep your mouth shut and have everyone else assume you're okay. So none of us will take every opportunity and use it to its fullest. None of us will encounter every single person in the world and instantly convert them to Christianity. None of us, no matter our training or background or calling, can instantaneously convert the whole world. But all of us can think of a missed opportunity. All of us can think of at least one time when someone was in our presence and asked for prayer, or asked for help, or simply looked sad. And we as Christians in ourselves had to wrestle with, do I do something? Do I miss my appointment, delay my day, be inconvenienced to reach out as Christ would? Or do I turn away and go on with my life and hope someone else helps them? And it's in those moments that the early church was teaching that you need to reconcile and be like Christ. You need to put down what you're doing and turn to that person in need and pray, or share a kind word, or an action like Christ would, and witness in that way. Because to turn away is to be a pagan. But to turn towards is to act like Christ, even if you are doing that in a way that certainly is not as perfect as Christ our Lord would do. But you're trying. You're moving in the right direction. You're showing a servant's heart. You're showing love. And I think today especially, when we think about women in our lives and thanking them, I know for myself, I can think of a million things to thank my mother for. But I can also think of a lot of times I was pretty nasty to my mom and maybe not as thankful as I should have been. I think in many ways I, as a mother, have been fantastic and awesome, and other moms complimented me. And other times where I was a pretty bad mom, and my daughter probably was pretty mad at me. So in all aspects of our lives and all roles we have, sometimes we're going to be on our game and do it so well. And other times we're going to fall short. And the early church, unfortunately, felt that if they fall short once, they had to give up. And the encouragement in this letter is no. If you find yourself being socially awkward, being mocked, being ignored by the culture around you who doesn't know Christ, that might happen sometimes. But don't keep your mouth shut or withhold the love of Christ simply because of one or two bad encounters. Keep being like Christ. Keep acting in ways that share the good news through not only your words, but also your actions. And allow the Holy Spirit to work so that some of those situations will lead to amazing opportunities for faith sharing. Although the end of the letter does not end this way, I think if a modern editor was writing this first letter of Peter, after these 12 verses we read, and the tagline at the end would be, when you leave this sanctuary, your ministry continues. Although together it's easy to be comfortable and stable in our faith when we're around like-minded Christians, when you walk out the door into the rest of your life, you continue to have that same Christ-like life, to use the same words of good news, and to behave in ways that allow the Holy Spirit to work. Amen.